You probably hate some of the technology that's in your workplace, and our next guest says the deal between CRM and Slack probably is not helping. Shira Ovide of the New York Times joins us on her latest piece entitled Why Your Workplace Software Stinks. Shira, it's good to have you. Welcome.
Thank you.
The piece is great because you really present this puzzle with regards to employees' worker software, and that is sort of brought about by different priorities, whether it's your employer who pays the bills or your workers who actually end up using the product.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Look, products like Slack and Dropbox and lots of these other young software companies that have started in the last decade or so are predicated on the idea that the technology that's going to win in the workplace is the technology that you and I like to use as workers. But it's not always true, right? Because software at work is eventually sold to a boss, and bosses have different priorities than you and me. They want software that is easy to buy, that's cheap, that has lots of security features or other kinds of features that you and I might not care about. And that's often at odds with technology that is actually easy and good to use for the rest of us.
You talk about, I love this line, the half-truth of the empowered worker, and you sort of tie it to Slack, which obviously was hugely popular among the rank and file, but you say they ended up selling out, is how you put it. I wonder how you're thinking of Slack and using it as a lens to talk about this bigger issue.
Yeah, and in a way, it's kind of a bummer to me, right? Because I like to use products like Slack and Dropbox and Airtable and these other good to use for the rest of us workers. But again, the companies that win, particularly in workplace technologies, are the companies that effectively sell technology to bosses, to hospital administrators, to restaurant chain owners, to people in suits and ties. And in that way, a lot hasn't changed since the old days when we thought of companies like Oracle and SAP and Microsoft and their salespeople, yelling into car phones and playing golf and having steak dinners with IT managers. That's still kind of the truth of workplace software.
Sure, it's an interesting approach you have here. I think I might disagree, but I'm interested in going back and forth on it because you're essentially declaring the end of freemium. Because companies like Slack, Box, Dropbox have this marketing and distribution theory that will offer a free version, get small teams inside a company hooked. They will show management that they're more productive on our product, and then the enterprise will adopt it. Are you saying that that's gone as far as it can go, and now it's the sales organizations entirely who have control? Freemium no longer works in the enterprise?
I think that's a great point, John. I'm glad you raised it. I do agree with you that that is still a very powerful force, that idea that you and I can try something in alone or in small teams, or the classic case of software developers buying Amazon Web Services, on the sly on their credit card, and then eventually convincing their bosses that it's worth buying for the whole company or for their whole team. But I do think there are limits to that approach, to that freemium approach. Because again, eventually a boss has to buy something and their priorities may be at odds with what we want out of technology. And ultimately, if the boss is the customer, then what you and I like as consumers of workplace technology takes a backseat.
Finally, Shira, on a week where Benioff gave a great interview to the Times and where we saw him introduce Butterfield, what do you think is their thought process? Because although they run these large companies now, at one time they were young entrepreneurs and young developers. Don't they remember what it's like to have to use this stuff day to day?
I wonder about that sometimes, right? Because I think we've seen this evolution in the technology industry, I don't know, in the last 15 or 20 years, where people like Mark Benioff really were the Davids trying to take on the Goliaths, the sort of Oracles and SAPs and Microsofts of the previous generation. And now people like Mark Benioff, they're Goliath, right? They are the establishment. And boy, I bet it's really hard to forget what it was like when you were, the proverbial startup in a garage when you're Mark Benioff and you're a billionaire.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.